going to start off at the beginning. So I just want to ask, can everybody hear me? Am I talking loud enough? Must I speak a little bit like this? A little bit louder. So yeah, I'm going to start at the beginning. My name is Marlies. Hi, everyone. And I was born in Klerksdorp, Northwest Province. Yeah. So I'm the eldest of 3 sisters. And we grew up in a house where the monsters were hidden in the closet. You know, we kept an image like everything was fine, but the abuse that my father had towards my mother was physical and emotional. And I just remember as a small girl, how we would play with our dolls just to, you know, escape our reality and just escape the neglect that we suffered as young girls. And then by that time I was the age of 12, my mother finally decided she was going to get divorced, and she divorced my father. And we moved to Potchefstroom, to my mother's family. And there my mother, she got on her feet, kind of, you know, the family helped. And we actually did very well in school. I was like a top 10 academic, and I participated in school activities. I did some sports. I'm not a sporty person, but I did some sports. And you know, at the end of matric, I actually graduated with 5 distinctions. And through our church, I went to university, and I did go to study. And we did grow up in church. I just want to tell you this as well. We did grow up in church, but I never really knew the Father. I never had a relationship with God. I never really understood it. So to me, God was this person that I feared if I sinned. So then I went to university, and then in my 2nd year, we started working in this cocktail lounge, like bar ladies. We started, just for like extra income, because we were quite poor. And we also wanted all these earthly things. We also wanted the nice clothes and all the stuff our friends had. And in my 3rd year, things actually just went from bad to worse. So in my 3rd year, my mom actually met this guy in the bar, and she decided she was gonna just leave with this guy. And she left us young girls behind, and we were left to fend for ourselves. I remember my middle sister stayed behind in the flat, not knowing where to go next. And I moved in with an English family that I met in the bar. So it was these 2 English brothers. Me and the youngest brother became friends, and he felt sorry for me, and he took me in. But I was always fascinated with the older brother. This older guy just fascinated me, and I was so intrigued with him. And I didn't know how dangerous he actually was. So it was just a back and forth, and one day this family chased me away. They didn't want me there anymore. And I ended up with an old school friend, a girl that I knew from school. I didn't know her that well. And she was actually smoking weed. So one night they offered me some weed, and I took 1 puff, and I fell asleep. But weed was definitely the gateway drug for me. After that, I was just stoning for a while. I was like a hippie, you know. And but I was still working in the bars. And so one night I got drunk in the bar, and the girl that worked with me, she actually offered me a line of cat on the toilet seat. And it was the weirdest feeling, you know. You're still on a pluck, if I can say it like that, but you're not drunk. You can still, you know, operate. And yeah, then I started snorting here and there. Eventually, I got the dealers' numbers. Most of my dealers were Nigerians. And I just entered a life of partying, and I became this party girl. And I felt kind of accepted. You know, I was always kind of nerdy, and I felt cool, and I felt accepted, and I felt like, you know, I've made some friends. But also, I started partying with adults. Like, the people that I used drugs with were like businessmen, teachers, sisters, and they actually just used the youngsters to get the drugs. Like, we took the risk, and yeah, they would just party with us. At this point, this older brother that I met actually started to show interest in me because he was already an addict. And I started chilling with this guy. We went together, we were like friends. Eventually it became like a sexual relationship, like a friends with benefits thingy. And yeah, I fell pregnant on drugs with this guy's baby. And I just remember, by this point I really realized I had a problem. Like, while this life was growing inside of me, the urge to use more and more drugs grew even more. And yeah, I was just back and forth. Obviously, I was loyal to this guy. He wasn't loyal to me. He was sleeping with a lot of the girls. It was just really a life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And he rejected me. He said, "This is not my child." At that point, he was the only guy that I slept with. He had this hold over me. He had this, I can't actually explain it, but I put my worth into this guy. He made me feel loved. He made me feel accepted. And obviously I can tell you, we never put our worth in people. We put our worth in Jesus. Jesus is the one that gives us our worth. So yeah, I was back and forth. I ended up in Klerksdorp with my father for a while. He took me in. And I was just really depressed. I seriously needed an abortion. I didn't want a baby. I was so young. I was so ashamed. The shame was just hanging over me. I couldn't go through with the abortion. And eventually this guy showed up and he said, "Okay, I want you back. Come back to Potchefstroom. I'm going to be better. Like, I want this baby. And I'm going to support you." And he manipulated me and I went back to Potchefstroom. And when I got back, things were actually much worse. They stayed on this small holding out of Potchefstroom. It was a very dark place. You know, there were like a lot of people coming and going, just drugging together. Some guys openly declared they had like powers that I got from the devil. And yeah, obviously he didn't want me to use drugs, so I would steal drugs just to get my next fix so I can get high. But when I got back, this guy also changed a lot. He started smoking crystal meth. In South Africa we call it tik. So the abuse came much darker. It became more violent. He would abuse me physically, emotionally. Because I was smoking a lot of cigarettes and on drugs, I had this low placenta and I was bleeding all the time. He would force me, we would have sex together because of the sexual immoral lifestyle that I was leading. And then afterwards I would bleed for days. And you know, I just hanged out with this guy in scrapyards and all these filthy places. And eventually I ended up in hospital. They admitted me for 1 week. And then, obviously, the sisters couldn't understand, why is this girl sleeping all the time? Obviously, I was in withdrawal. And by the end of that week, I phoned the Nigerian, gave me my next fix, and I walked out of there. After this incident, it was even worse. This guy and his mother would also party and use drugs together. And they would lock me up in that small holding outside of Potchefstroom with these vicious dogs like bull terriers. And I know bull terriers can be cute if you train them and you love them. But these dogs weren't trained and they weren't loved. They were kicked and hurt. So they would just attack anyone. So yeah, the night actually I went into labor, this guy locked me up. And he and his mom went out partying and using drugs and drinking. And I just remembered clearly how he crushed some of this thick crystal meth on a steel plate and he put it next to me. Like he said, now you have a choice. And obviously I didn't have a choice. I was an addict. But I wanted the drug, so I snorted it. And after that, I actually wanted more. So I started snorting grandpa powders. And it doesn't taste nice. Don't do it. So yeah, I snorted these grandpa powders. And then all of a sudden, I just had this pain flaming up from my belly. And I knew something was seriously wrong. And I phoned this guy and I said, please come fetch me. I need to get to a hospital. He was like, no. Eventually, he sent his mom. She took me to the state hospital in Potchefstroom. And they confirmed I was in labor 26 weeks pregnant. They tried everything to stop the contractions. They gave me medicine. I remember I was like in and out of consciousness. I don't remember everything that well. But the next morning, I woke up in the maternity ward between the mommies. And I woke up, I felt my waters broke. I felt a severe pain, and within seconds, I gave birth to this baby boy. I didn't even look. I was just lying with the covers over me. And I remember the mommy next to me actually called the doctors and said, please come help this girl. And then, yeah, they took the baby. He was in NICU for 5 days, about 5 days. And then in this 5 days, I bargained with this God. I didn't really know. Like, Lord, if you're there, if you hear me, please save this baby's life and I will change. And obviously the baby didn't make it. And the baby was very, very sick. High sugar, low sugar, high blood, low blood. And he passed. And then I was angry. And I said, God's not real. And I became an atheist. And yeah, this actually opened very dark doors in my life. I started smoking crystal meth. I actually lost a few teeth because of crystal meth. Yeah, I just ended up in this situation with this guy where we would just use drugs like for weeks on end. I didn't sleep. I didn't bath. I had this smell hanging over me. I had the weirdest smell. I just stank. And I was just living this filthy lifestyle. And yeah, this guy just, they actually took the baby's ashes. His mom took the baby's ashes because I never had the courage to have a funeral. And even when I was in hospital, some of my family members came to just, they wanted to help. But the shame was just too much. So there was no funeral, there was no closure, and I just ended this life of drugs even further. So when I started off with drugs, it starts very fun, and it was with the fun crowd, but I ended up with the druggies, the dark side of drugs, because it really pulls you in. And then one night, I used a lot of drugs mixed, uppers, downers, everything mixed together. I don't recall the evening that well. I remember this guy picked me up. We drove to the squatter camps to pick up something or drop off something because we also started like dealing drugs. But I remember eventually he dropped me off at my little filthy flat. He dropped me off there. And I used even more by myself. And that evening I had this dark encounter. Because when you're on drugs for days on end, not eating, not sleeping, you just hallucinate. You're like, you don't know what's real, what's not real, you don't know anything. And I just had this interaction where I experienced something with 4 legs like a horse raping me. And I just remember the dark, cold flames, and I just remember it had a specific smell. And for a long time, I just pushed that memory out of my mind. And I said, this was just a hallucination, So I phoned my mom. By this time, my mom knew I was an addict. I told her I have a problem. So I phoned my mom. She picked me up. and she took me to a doctor. They couldn't do much. They gave me some Benadu, and then they said, that's it. But this gave my mom evidence. So if your family is poor and you don't have resources, you can take your child or your family member to court, and they can place that person like in a government facility. So that's what she needed. She needed the evidence. And obviously I was so angry at her. You know, I hated my mom for such a long time. Obviously she left us for this guy, and then, you know, she wanted to lock me up. So while the court case was going on, I was under house arrest. So I never ended up in the rehab facility. So my sister was my guardian and my father, and I could do nothing alone. They had to watch me like a hawk. And I actually became sober. I did leave the drugs. I got a big fright because they wanted to lock me up. And, you know, I got a little bit on my feet again. And then I actually got a nice job. I moved back to Potchefstroom, and I got myself a little flat. And it went good for a while. But after a while, I did relapse. It was just in a more controlled way. Like I would party with the first friends, you know, the businessmen and the party animals. I would party with them at night, and I would work at day, or just try to work. I made a lot of mistakes at work. But at this point, I just hated myself. You know, I didn't care if I lived or if I died. I had no self-love whatsoever. And, you know, and drugs is just a different type of world. You start with weed, it just pulls you in a little bit more, and eventually it just leads to a lot of other sins, you know. And at this point, I ended up in very sexual, immoral situations. I remember one night I ended up in a foursome situation, and afterwards the shame was just so overwhelming again, you know, because I've made all these mistakes. Yeah, and then, you know, while I was getting sober, I also want to tell you this part. The pain of getting sober is really, really bad. It feels like someone is just hitting you with a hammer on your face. Everything pains, all your muscles pain. I didn't have control over my stomach or my bladder. I was just very, very sick. But then, one night, you know, I was on this journey getting better, and I would be pulled back in a little bit again, and then I tried to get better, and then just one night I met Jesus, and I remember it clearly. I just remember I was in my room, and I was actually reading a book. I don't know if you know the book, The Lineage of Grace, from Francine Rivers. You know, the stories of the women in the Bible that leads to the history of Jesus. And it just had such an impact on me. And I remember I couldn't see Jesus, but I just felt love. For the first time in a long time, I felt love again. And that night, I think Jesus just pulled away some of the sin and the shame. And I just felt like, I can do this. I am not a piece of rubble. I am someone. And yeah, then my journey started. So I got off the drugs and I started journaling. So every time I wanted to fall back, I would just write a letter to God and say exactly what I was feeling, what I was going through, how sick I felt, and I became sober. And things actually changed in my life. I started doing park runs with my aunties. We started doing exercise, and you know, I actually got promoted at work. I got a company car. My little sister is mentally disabled, and she wanted to come live with me. I just want to tell you, before this, she was scared of me, or she could feel the darkness inside of me. So she came to live with me, and you know, we just built a life together. And I thought, this is it. I'm happy. You know, I started going to the movies again. I started spending time with friends and with family. I actually started going to church again. I actually became involved in the Sunday school again. And I never wanted to get married. I never dated again, and I never wanted to get married. And I told myself, you will never have children. I didn't deserve to have children because I drugged the baby to death. But God just wants to give us more than we can ever imagine. You know, He just came and He just rocked my world, you know. His grace is so big. I think we can never imagine what He has in store for us. So the next part of my testimony. So I lived with my sister. I lived in different towns. So there I met someone, a lady, and she asked me, can I please have your number? And she first asked, are you married? And I said, I don't have time for men. And she said, can I please have your number? And she said, you need to meet my brother. And I was like, oh, you know, yeah. You know, to me, all men were the same. Like, they had their way with you, they pulled up their pants and they left. That was my idea of a man. So, I gave my work number though. I didn't give my personal number. So I gave my number. And then I got this text from my husband. My husband's name is Peter. So Peter typed something like, hi, I'm Peter Meyer. I'm 36 years old. I stay in Krugersdorp. And it's time for me to take a wife. So I thought, wow, this guy is very honest, you know, just straightforward, you know. And I actually got a fright. I gave the phone to my work colleague, my friend Manoush, and she's a coloured, and she was like very witty, saying, oh, okay, boer soek 'n vrou, you know. So, for some reason, you know, all the ladies that I worked with, I had some older friends in my life then, you know, like they would just give me a little push. And they said, you know, talk to this guy. Just be careful. You can talk to him. So I started messaging with Peter. And at that point, me and my sister actually went to the South Coast. It was my first independent holiday. You know? And I felt like, yes. So we went to the South Coast, and this guy was texting me. And even asked things like, where are you on holiday? And I said, South Coast. I didn't tell him. So yeah, then he asked me, you know what, I would like to meet you. Can we please meet at a coffee shop in Potchefstroom? And if we don't like each other, you know, we just leave it at that, but let's just meet, let's see. So I actually wanted to, you know, I didn't want to go that night. And I remember the lady at work, she's like, wasn't like a 60, 70, she said, please go. So I went there, and I met Peter, and we had a few dates. And in these dates, I could tell him about the drugs. To tell people I was an addict, no, I'm not an addict, that was easy. That wasn't the difficult part. The difficult part was to tell people about the baby that died because I used drugs. So that part I hid from the world. I deleted all the images of Facebook that my sister posted. I just hid that part. The shame was so overwhelming for me. And then our second date, official date, was actually in Clarence. So this guy asked me, will you please go with me to this wedding in Clarence? And I wanted to go, but I was unsure how to tell him, but I need my own room, you know, like. So, and did I have a nice room, guys? I had the best room. So I went with Peter. You know, he was very gracious with me. He didn't touch me, didn't hold my hand. I wondered who was more scared, me or him. I don't know. I'm not sure. And the Sunday after the wedding, we were sitting at this little cute cafe in Clarence, and he kept talking about children. And I heard that voice saying, tell him everything, don't hold out. And I told him about my sexual lifestyle, I told him about the baby that I've lost. And he didn't ask me any questions like, how did it happen? Who was the father? The only question Peter asked me was, did you forgive yourself? And I just thought, wow, this is something else. We actually went through to my father. He was very sick at that point with cancer. So we went to my father and he introduced himself. Like, he just introduced himself. But if you could meet my husband, he's really an introvert. He's actually a very shy person. But he had confidence. He had a lot of confidence. So I met my father that Monday morning. My father, who was actually, wasn't a very serious person. You know, he was always making jokes, hitting on women, you know, just being fun. He phoned me in tears and he said, Marlies, you are going to get married. And I was like, what? You know, like, can I please just have an actual adult relationship for once? And 2 weeks after that, Peter came to visit me again, me and my sister, and he said, Marlies, I need to tell you something. And he said, God said I am going to marry you. And I'm sure. So I want to tell you a little bit about Peter. So Peter grew up in opposite circumstances than me. The stories he tells is about the way his mother is washing the dishes and his father is just hugging her. And he had a wonderful childhood. And I have an awesome mother-in-law, I really do. And Peter, and I asked permission to tell this part, Peter never slept before marriage. Peter didn't have any girlfriends before me. He worked very hard. And he actually already bought a house in faith that he was going to have a wife and he's going to have children. So yeah, our journey started. I think Peter just wanted to show me the Father's heart. You know, I got engaged in New York City, in Central Park. I was spoiled, I got engaged in New York. Yeah, on the day that we got married, we were actually together for 6 months. So it also happened very quickly. And then, yeah, we were married. But before we got married, you know, we come from different church backgrounds as well. We needed to find a church to get married in. We needed someone to marry us. So someone told us about a Changed Lives in Roodepoort. And that's the first church we actually visited, you know, like, we just church hunting. We're going to find a church. And I was actually very reluctant. I didn't want to go to church. So we went to church, and after the sermon, he walked to the pastor. I don't know where, it was a different guy, he was had a lot of courage. He went to the pastor and he said, will you marry us? And the pastor looked at him and he said, yes. And then, yeah, I started my journey in church. I sat at the back. I didn't want to be in the front. And then I actually got baptized before I got married to Peter. And, yeah, the first year of marriage was absolute hell for my husband. I actually started drinking again, like wine. I would drink wine with the lady that was working for us on a Friday. Yeah, when he got home, I was drunk. He got burnt food. It was just horrible. And you know, I was very mean to him. Like, I would throw him with food. I would curse at him. And he would just stay gentle. Like, he would just be calm. And yeah, he just waited for me. It was like Peter knew who I was going to be before I knew who I was going to be. And yeah, I became better. And then we decided, you know, we want a family now. We're going to start a family. And on this journey for starting a family, I went to fall pregnant. And obviously in the back of my mind, I thought, this is my sin. I'm never going to have kids. I'm going to, Peter is going to have to go through this with me, and he has done nothing to deserve this. And then one morning in church, I actually worshipped for the first time. I didn't worship before that. And I just poured out my heart. And then there was a lady. There was a lady. And she actually went to the front and she gave me word. You are going to be a mom. God showed me you are going to be a mom. And that lady is Debbie. So that's how we met. That was our first encounter. And 2 weeks later, I was pregnant. So I would like to show you my family. I would like to show you. This is my family. And we went through a lot of struggles. And I think my heart is just saying today, like, I don't even know a lot of you. And I don't know where you have been. And I don't know what you have been through. I don't know how you have been abused. I don't know what you have used. And just know, even though you feel like there's no one on this earth that loves you, and you feel rejected, and you feel like there's no one seeing you, He is seeing you, and He loves you. And Jesus didn't die on the cross for the lady next to you and the lady in front of you. He was crucified for you. And you deserve a better life. And He wants to give you a better life. He doesn't want you to stay in the circumstances that you are now. He wants to give you the world. So I just wrote a little piece that I want to share with you. On this. I'm going to read this part because I don't want to leave anything out. Today I am healthy. Even my eyesight is better. After the drugs I could not see. My eyes were like very blurry and I was twitching a lot. My eyesight is better. I can see all the wonder in the world. I have peace, I have joy, and I have forgiveness. I have forgiven my mom. Our relationship is actually awesome. She's the best grandmother ever. I think the things that she could never be for us, she's for my 2 boys. My relationships with my family is restored. And some of the relationships has grown deeper than I could have ever imagined. I am a good wife. I'm a good wife. And I'm an awesome mama, an awesome mommy. Yes. I have my own little small business from home. I wake up every morning excited and ready for the day. For a long time I was severely depressed. I really didn't care if I was living or dying. I was just so depressed. So I love living. I love living, guys. And then I was a walking grave that through the love of Jesus Christ turned into a blooming garden. And I just want to read you these words. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. My prayer for you today is to know that you are loved no matter what. No matter where you come from or where you've been, you are never too lost to be found by the Good Shepherd, and you are never too filthy to be washed clean. He can turn any mess into a masterpiece. His love is never ending, and He wants us to run to Him. He doesn't want us to run to all these earthly things. It will never satisfy us. You, dear women, you are a daughter of the highest King, and you are loved.